Sounds like somebody has a cat. All right, so first question. How many people here, and raise your hand if you're in the Zoom, we'll get a number here, have never programmed their DMR radio before? John. Well, yeah. Honestly? Really haven't? Oh, goodness. Okay. So some of you have some experience with this. I like giving these classes because I remember my own DMR journey. I started out on a Vertex standard DMR radio. And no offense to Vertex standard, they make great radios. But I can say, in my opinion, the programming experience on that radio was not exactly nice, shall we say. It was frustrating. It was very limiting, and I didn't like it. And so once I got that learned out and learned about the other radios, and the other radios came into play, like Connect Systems, CS700, I had original CS700, and the software was different. It's like, oh, this is so much better. And then ever since then, the DMR scene in amateur radio has just exploded, right? I remember when Anytone released the first 868. Everybody remember what the big deal about this radio was? It was the first dual band radio. First viable dual band radio that amateurs could use, right? Dual band DMR. Because before that, DMR, and it still is, as everybody should know by now if you've taken one of my classes, DMR is a commercial radio protocol, right? It's not an amateur radio protocol. It was not made for us. Okay? We're shoehorning it into what we need it to do. We're smacking it around, making it work for us. Okay? That means that some things about DMR aren't going to make sense. Accept this. It will make your life easier. If you've been to one of my presentations, you know this is the first slide I put in every one of my presentation because somebody will always say, well, why don't you just call it this? Or why don't they just change that? They're not going to. Because it's a commercial radio protocol. It's not an amateur radio protocol. Now, what this has done, as I've learned, as I've gone through conferences and whatnot, is it spurred a whole other subgenre of radio protocols in the amateur radio field that are looking to make digital radio better for amateurs. D-Star was a good thing, but as we are amateur radio enthusiasts, we're never satisfied. So someone's always going to try to come up with a better protocol, right? For today, just know this is the way it works. No, we cannot change it. Let go of that and just learn how it works so that you can program your own radio. That is the whole point of being here today, is to learn how to program your radio, right? I have a long list of email, they've tapered off recently, thank goodness. People coming in, can you make me a code plug? Can you program my radio? If I send you this, could you do this? And my answer is always no. And I point them at my YouTube video saying, start here. Right? It's like, how many people here have a chauffeur? Right? Okay. Why don't you have a chauffeur? Because you learn to drive your own car, right? You learn to drive your own car, you can program your own radio. Okay? Now, we're going to do an exercise because this is a workshop. So we're going to workshop this. So we're going to program a channel that just happens to go to my little hotspot that's sitting up here. So here are the specs. This brings up, while you're writing this down, brings up the first thing you need to know about programming your radio. It's like, what in the world are you going to use it for? Are you going point to point? Are you trying to get into a repeater? Right? And if you're getting into the repeater, you need to know things. Some of this may not make sense to you right now. We're going to go through what each one of these mean. And then we're going to show you how to get it into your radio. Now, this bottom one here, the talk group, the numbers, the important part. The bottom one here is a label. Okay? Give you guys all a second to get that down. And we'll come back to that when we get ready to actually do the programming. Yes, Doug? It's a typo or it's not. Does anybody here that didn't read that as megahertz? Anybody? Only the technical people. Yes, the end users understood. Thank you. All All right. Anybody else? Anybody need some more time to write all that down? All right. Again, like I said, I'll bring this slide back up at the end when we actually get ready to do the programming. So let's get into it. What are we going to talk about? Basics. Going to go over the basics just real quick. We're going to talk about vendors and CPSs because that's a discussion. What you need to know, right? The workflow, because there is a workflow, and if you don't follow the workflow, all you're going to do is frustrate yourself. Okay? So let's start with the basics. That is an actual quote. I have the t-shirt. Anybody to tell you tell anybody's like, oh yeah, I work in computers. Like, Greg, I have this computer program in my house. Can you help me with it? No. $500 an hour, 1 hour minimum. Oh, you can't afford that? Yeah, sorry. Okay. So what is this thing called DMR? Now you may have also heard the term turbo. It's a Motorola term, but let's get into this. DMR is an international commercial radio standard that originated in Europe with ETSI. It's not even American. Gasp. Right? Now, turbo is just is it a trademark? Is it what is it? It's a trademark by Motorola, right? So their Moto Turbo is their DMR branded, their Motorola branded DMR products. We like Moto Turbo because they have Site Connect, which is great, but that's another story. You'll see a lot of amateur radio networks put up as turbo networks. That's not so much anymore, but it used to be. It's called turbo networks. That just means they're using primarily Moto Turbo equipment. You don't have to have a Motorola radio to get on these networks, thank goodness. They're great radios, but you don't need one. You can get one of the cheaper Chinese radios, as everybody here probably already knows. Why do we care about DMR? Okay, so real quick, the first thing about it is commercial radio standard, which means that it is narrow band, right? All commercial repeaters and whatnot with the United States now are narrow band, which means if you have an original wideband allocation, you can fit 2 repeaters in the same space of that allocation. So now we've got 2 repeaters in the space of 1, frequency-wise, right? It is digital. That's the digital and digital mobile radio, right? So the clarity is better generally than an analog radio, and it tends to stay clearer longer. So in an analog radio, generally speaking, the further you get away, the less clear the signal gets. The readability isn't as good. With digital, what you get is that you get up right until you can't get readability, and then it falls off. But it stays clearer longer because all you're doing is sending in ones and zeros. And as long as your radio on the repeater can discern a 1 from a 0, the signal is clear, which is really cool. Now, the DMR protocol, right, calls for two separate channels, if you will. They're called talk groups. No, not talk groups. They're called time slots or repeater slots. Those terms are interchangeable. So you have a slot 1 and a slot 2, and those 2 slots are separate channels within, essentially in the repeater, right? And when you transmit, you have to specify which slot you're transmitting on, because there'll be 2 separate conversations. If you're talking on slot 1, the person that's listening on slot 2 will not hear you. Okay? So this repeater acts as 2 separate repeaters with the same frequency pair. So now you've got 4 virtual repeaters in the space of 1 wideband allocation. Virtually, right? So now you can see with this kind of technology, with the allocating space, allocating frequencies and whatnot, why this has become so popular, just on that alone. Questions on this? Okay, basic DMR theory. All right, now there's some new concepts. We start out with an old concept, frequency pair, right? This isn't new. The difference being is that you're going to see some weirder numbers because we're doing this in a narrow band thing now rather than just wideband. So you're going to see some longer numbers, right? The next concept is a color code. The color code is your first access point into the repeater. It functions generally the same as a CSS or a DCS tone, but it's not a tone, right? We're sending digital signals. We're sending packets, very similar to a network. If you're familiar with network packets, it's very, very similar. So this color code gets encoded into the packet. You don't actually hear the tone. It's just that the innards of the radio gets the signal, sees that code, is like, oh yeah, that's a code, right? Now, this is where some of the fun part comes in, because it's called a color code, right? It's a number. Not actually a color, but it's still called a color code for whatever reason, okay? So if you want to get into a repeater, you have to know the color code of the repeater, okay? Next thing, repeater slot. I mentioned before, we have two time slots, or repeater slots, interchangeable, 1 and 2. You have to know which one you're going to be talking on. Okay, this can get confusing. You talk about Brandmeister, it can get somewhat very confusing. It's either really confusing or really simple, depending on your point of view. In addition, each talk group can be further segmented by what we call talk groups. A lot of the chatter in DMR networks, especially Brandmeister, chatters around this talk group concept, right? Because the way it's supposed to work is that if you're talking to somebody on a repeater or even direct, your radio should be set to the same talk group. Generally speaking, there are some exceptions. We'll talk about all call later. But if you're on the same repeater, you need to be on the same time slot. You need to be on the same talk group to communicate with each other. Okay? Now here's the fun part. This is where it gets a little weird. Again, this is where I remind you, this is a commercial radio protocol designed for commercial users. And in commercial situations, this makes a lot of sense. But now we're trying to drag it into amateur radios and do amateur radio use and trying to do all these weird, funky things with it, and it kind of breaks down. Okay? You can assign multiple talk groups to a repeater slot. But you can only have one conversation going on at a time on each repeater slot. Okay? So if I key up, let's go back up. If I assign talk groups 10 and 20 to repeater slot 1, I key up on talk group 10 on that repeater slot. Somebody tries to transmit on that repeater slot to talk group 20, what happens? You get a busy tone. Sorry, can't get in. Right? Now this guy gets done, he keys off, waits for the response. This guy keys up again on talk group 20, starts talking, because now the repeater slot's free, right? The other guy the guy on 10 was trying to contact with tries to key in. Nope, sorry, the guy on 20 is on it. He's going to key up. He's going to hear nothing. He's going to get a busy tone, and then he won't hear anything because he's listening on 10. The guy's chattering on 20, right? We hit this wall really easy, really early in the amateur radio. You went to California, and I saw repeaters listed there for public use, like 30, 40 talk groups on it. How in the world anybody could communicate with that many people on different talk groups talking? They didn't get it. They got it after the users complained. But this works because in certain commercial situations, you don't want to have too many repeaters, but you still want to be able to segment chat. And the people that have the radios don't control the programming. They're just given one and say, just stay on this channel, off you go, right? So in commercial situations, this makes sense. But we need to be aware of this in amateur radio because it can cause issues. Questions on this concept? Yes, Willem.
Why can't you just private line like you where you have your own?
Can you even do that in DMR? No. So say it again for the people on Zoom.
If you know, in analog, we have this thing when you have an FRS radio that says private line, right? So all you have to do is turn on the private line, and then that one frequency, suddenly 20 people can all have their own private line. How does that work?
I don't think it works that way. And you know that. Yeah, that's just CCCS tones. So all that does is prevent the radio from keying up when somebody else transmits that doesn't match. It doesn't make your line private. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. On this one, it's the same way. In fact, most radios now have something called a digital monitor. Some of the more elegant people that like to have fun, they call it promiscuous mode, right? Whereas if you set that on and the Anytones have this, if you turn on digital monitor, and you can actually do dual slot digital monitor, any talk group that activates on the repeater or transmits from the repeater, it'll open up the speaker on your radio and you can listen into it. So there is no privacy at all. And now there is a way in the DMR spec to do encryption But encryption is a big no-no in amateur radio because you're obfuscating your transmission, and that's a big no. Don't do that. Bad juju. Other questions? Okay. All right. Now, this brings us to the fun of the receive group. Because everything, and you'll see this in your CPS. Most of the time in the CPS, you have your channel in this split into two sides. You have your transmit side and you have your receive side. Right? The transmit side will have your transmit frequency. Your receive side will have the receive frequency. The transmit side will ask you for your talk group. What talk group do you want to transmit on? The receive side will have a receive group. It's basically asking you what talk groups do you want to listen for. Okay? Now, because you can have multiple talk groups on a repeater slot in the repeater, it makes sense to put those talk groups into the receive group for that channel. Because that way you can make sure that no talk group is transmitting before you try to transmit back, right? Even if it's not the one that you're going to be transmitting on. This is where it starts getting really kind of confusing. Now, in the amateur radio land, there are a lot of radios, especially the anytones and whatnot, that when you put a talk group on a channel, it automatically activates that talk group for the receive side. Okay? Also, we talked about with digital monitor. Digital monitor makes receive groups pretty much pointless for if you turn it on. So, but this is the way it's supposed to be done. This is the way the spec has you do it. And if you're doing this commercially, you would definitely still follow this because you will control which talk groups each one of your users can actually hear. Make sense? Questions? Thoughts? Queries? This is the bit that trips up a lot of people. And if you have any questions, they'll just reach out. We can get you cleared up. Question?
I'll give you a talk.
Okay.
This is excellent.
Yep.
Generally on RMHAM,
Yes.
we are not reading talk groups.
Right.
Got a microphone. I was saying, Mike, this is great information, but generally on RMHAM, we only have one time slot to one talk group.
Yep.
And I'm sure you're going to present the couple of corner cases later in your talk where this will be very important.
Yep.
But generally, you won't have to do this because we tried to keep it simple for
But
you.
you try to keep it simple, especially in Colorado. There are a lot of repeaters down New Mexico way that deviate from this. That's because the repeater owners do it. They can do their own thing. But in Colorado, for our repeaters that we maintain, one talk group per repeater slot to keep it simple, right? Because especially in MCOM, simplicity is important. Willem?
List.
No. We'll go into scan lists later. All right. Let's talk about CPS differences. This is one of my favorite pet peeves. This radio just released yesterday. It's the most fascinating thing. It's been all over the news. Do you guys have a code plug for this? No, we don't. Right? Right? This is a problem. Because again, DMR has gotten really big in amateur radio, so everybody in their sister goes out to the Chinese radio providers, grabs the innards of the, which are, if you look at it carefully, a lot of them are exactly the same. Make their own radio with their own branding and their own code, their own CPS, which isn't compatible with any other CPS, and sell it to the market to try to get into the game. All right. Some of these are actual rebrands. There are several Anytone rebrands. The software looks exactly the same. Code plugs aren't compatible. Right. So this is the thing. This is why when we put up on our site, it's like if you're buying your first DMR radio, do your research first. Find a radio that has existing code plugs and start there. Because you can pull the samples, you can put in your radio, you can get on the air, and you can learn as you go. So that you're not waiting to learn how to do things just so that you can start transmitting and getting on the air, right? Willem?
Any DMR radio off of eBay and it will work?
Maybe. There are a couple of radios that we've listed on our site that have some issues. The biggest issue that we see where we will put our foot down and say, please don't use these radios on our networks are the ones that for whatever reason, transmit on time slot 1 and time slot 2 simultaneously. And their brands have not been able to fix those radios, right? It's a big problem because you're only supposed to be in one. Now you're tying up two lines uselessly because your radio isn't operating properly. Doug.
What Mike is talking about is you'll see if it's a good manufacturer, they'll advertise you want a DMR Tier 2 radio. The Tier 1 radios were and I'm not fond of this term, to use one slot TDMA, time division. Well, what is one slot of TDMA? It's normal FDMA. But if you see a radio says Tier 2 compliant, there's high probability that
Yes.
it will be welcomed and accepted on our network.
Yes. Yes. So you want a Tier 2 radio. Most of the ones sold in the amateur radio world now are Tier 2 radios. There's not that it used to be a bigger problem than it is now, but that was a problem in the past. Question?
Well, if I can add one more thing, if you're buying, be really careful about bands and frequency ranges, because there are a lot of commercial DMR radios out there, and UHF business band does not always overlap with amateur, so check that carefully, and realize that a lot of these are also going to be single band only, so make sure you figure out what's in use in your area and buy accordingly.
So here's another, I'll make this plug because I do like these guys. Ham Radio Outlet does sell any tone radios, right? If you buy something from Ham Radio Outlet, chances are it's going to be perfectly fine for amateur radio, right? So there are the Connect Systems radios. If you buy from Connect Systems, they separate their website from the commercial and amateur. So you just go to the amateur section and buy something there. It'll be amateur radio compliant, right? So like I said, do your research. And if you have questions, ping us. We'll help you figure it out. Okay? All right. Sort of a rant. This is the differences in vendors. This is religion. Okay, what we're going into here is religion. It's technical religion. We all understand that it's religion. We all have our opinions. This is very opinionated. This is the most opinionated slide in the deck. Okay? Correct. All right, so, and we try to keep this, without getting too one-sided or the other, right? But typically, the Chinese-based radios, Anytones or whatnot, are more affordable than the Motorola's. Why are we singling out Motorola? Because Motorola's been doing DMR far longer than everybody else in the United States. Okay? And they're fantastic radios. However, and Doug, John, correct me if I'm wrong, historically, Motorola, the DMR section of Motorola hasn't been terribly amateur radio friendly. Okay? Less expensive to the purchase. The CPS is typically free. I have yet to see a Chinese radio where you had to pay for the CPS. Motorola has only recently deviated from their $300 for a 3-year license on the CPS. Can you put the put that on the mic? Yeah. But John's got the latest skinny on that.
Okay, Motorola changed their process for DMR CPS. It is now free, but they charge you $5 for a wideband programming key.
Is that so that's a one-time charge, or is that
one
a
time per computer?
Per computer.
So
Okay.
if you install it again or you blow up your computer, it's another $5.
Okay, bear that in mind. Very good. So this is now changed, which is fantastic. That's really good. All right. Every CPS, without question, without fail, has their own quirks. And I have CPSs that I haven't used in over 3 years because they're dumb. They all have their quirks. Even the Anytone. And I'll share you my favorite quirk with the Anytone when we get into it, because it doesn't make any sense. It's dumb, but it's there. Okay? Terms will differ. Right? Color code or access code, transmit, yeah, it's amazing. This is the one for the Anytone. Things that should be pull-down menus, they've turned into buttons for some reason. Right? Settings will be in different places, because why not? Right? And here's the big one. Please, if you take anything out of this class, take this. Just because it's the newest doesn't mean it's better than what came before. Ugh. But it's the newest thing, yes, and it has half the features and you pay twice as much for it. Congrats. Do your research, people. Any questions or anybody want to venture an opinion here? By all means, this is the time to do it. Willem.
have more capabilities than others. Like, for example, one of the things that Tristan will talk about at DMR 201, now that you know Tristan, is you can use Motorola radios by connecting a USB cable to it to actually set up a digital link. It's peculiar to just Motorola radios.
Yeah.
So I don't know what other features are in some of the other radios, but some manufacturers have feature-specific extensions that
Yes.
that's actually part of the DMR spec, but is not always supported in the radio.
Correct. Comment over here.
Question, CPS actually stands for code plug software?
Customer programming software.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Or consumer programming software, because again, commercial radios. It depends. Choose your acronym or abbreviation there. All right. Any other questions or thoughts on this? Yes.
I've noticed in the last couple of years that Motorola used products are, coming down in price as well. So they're almost becoming somewhat as affordable as a brand
Yep.
new Chinese unit. So for those that want to get into it
Yeah.
at the Motorola level, could probably do that now. So
Excellent. Yeah, there are other things that keep me away from the Motorola's because of certain preferences that I have. It has nothing to do with American versus Chinese. It has to do with the contact list. We'll get into that later. Okay. What do you need? This is an actual quote that I spoke to a customer when I worked at AOL Tech Support. She was going to sue us for false advertising because she got one of those AOL discs and it said, all you need is this disc and a modem and you can get online. So she said, yeah, it doesn't say you need a computer. I'm going to sue for false advertising. I sent her to our legal department. Like, have a nice day. All right. What do you need? Well, you need a radio. Let's start out there. Now, this can be argued because you guys are familiar with hotspots, right? Does everybody know about OpenSpot? Anybody here not know about OpenSpot? Okay. OpenSpot is a turnkey hotspot solution. I believe are they in Latvia or Estonia? I think they're in Estonia, right? But they sell this little module, it's about this big, and it's a self-contained hotspot, right? They're now on version 4. And the version 4 of their hotspot has an app, right? So the hotspot goes out to Brandmeister, say, right? And you can get on the app and use the app to transmit on Brandmeister from the app without a radio, right? So even that's changing. Still need a license, but that is changing. But generally speaking, you need a radio. All right. Second thing you need, programming cable. This is where a lot of things changed for folks that came over from amateur radios. Like, why can't I just front panel program it? Well, in the early days, DMR's commercial radio, right, can you front panel program a commercial radio? No. Kind of. Well, that may have changed since. But generally speaking, you didn't, so you had to program it. It's where the term code plug comes from. Because code plugs didn't used to be files. They used to be actual like electric plugs that you would plug in a thing, put the code in, take it out, plug it into the radio. Take the code, plug it in, code plug. Right? That's where that comes from. It was a chip. All right, so you need your radio. You need the programming cable to hook to your computer, which means you need a computer, right, with the associated appropriate programming software. I think this is like the 4th time I've said this. Every radio tends to come with its own software, so you need that radio software to program your radio. There's no universal CPS here, unfortunately. Wouldn't that be nice, right? All right. Of course, a Windows computer or a computer that can run Windows in an emulated mode, either be with a Windows VM or Wine. Your mileage may vary. You're on your own there. Right? So just be very careful with that. Prefer running Windows native on a Windows machine. If you're a Linux head, you're on your own, at your own risk. Okay? I have programmed a radio with a Windows VM. Windows VMs tend to work really well with USB pass-through. It works generally, but that's been my experience. Sorry, your mileage may vary. Okay? Avoid where prohibited. This is not legal advice. Use a Windows laptop if you can, or Windows machine directly if you can. Why is that? Why do you need Windows, do you think? And why? So most people are making software in Windows. Why is that?
Drivers.
Well, and it's a general universal reality in the computer world. Yes, there's a lot of hams that use Linux, but I guarantee you every ham has at least one Windows machine somewhere. Right? If you're going to choose which one to do, you don't want to eliminate an entire swath of your market because your programming software only runs on Linux. That's just the reality of it. Okay, I'm as much of a critic of Microsoft as anyone. I have a Windows laptop. Okay, the next thing you will need. This is the next concept that comes in that is unique to DMR in terms of amateur radio, and that's a radio ID. Right. So we have to have this discussion. A radio ID is not the same as your call sign. They are not the same. The radio ID is part of the DMR spec. In any given radio network, which is the radios and repeaters that are networked together, in order for that to function correctly, every radio has to have a separate identifier, a separate radio ID, or things get weird, right? Small networks, it's very, very easy to do, right? The people that program the radios just increment it by one throughout the thing, everybody's happy. Now, if you think about Brandmeister, which is a worldwide DMR network and other protocols, right? Worldwide. It gets really funky if everybody starts using the same set of IDs. People can't communicate with each other, things fall apart, things do weird things. So all those IDs need to be unique, right? You can get one, right? There is an organization, radioid.net, that is doing this now. It used to be part of DMR Mark. They separated it out. They do their own thing. You go to radioid.net, create an account, upload your downloadable proof of your radio license, give me your information, and they just assign you an ID. Off you go. Okay, simple as that. This is solely to be sure that when you're on one of these wide networks that you're not causing interference with other people because you have the same ID as somebody else. Okay, and you can use that ID on multiple networks. It keeps everything as clean as possible. Okay, create an account. You need to download a copy license. You can do that from the FCC website. That works fine. Okay? Any questions about the radio ID? Back in the back. Microphone, that guy.
Early on with DMR Mark, it was possible for clubs and organizations to request multiple radio IDs. I think that's changed and it's harder to get more than one. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, your average user, you and me, only really need one ID. The only thing you have to be sure of is that you're only using it in one radio at a time. So if you got this radio here and you're going to go to the radio car, get in your car, turn this one off, turn that one on, you're good to go. So long as you're not trying to transmit with two radios at the same time with the same ID, you should be fine, right? You can reuse it that way. It's that when you try to communicate from this radio to this radio and they have the same ID, it doesn't work. That's just part of the DMR protocol. It doesn't work. Willem.
Or is it brand specific?
I think it's universally true. I've had experienced that in every single radio that I've used. John?
One of the interesting things when we tried to request multiple IDs, the guys at radioid.net says, just program your radio to open up on the same ID. Well, you can't do that with all manufacturers, including Motorola, of which I have about 60 of them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so this one of these things where if only it could be different, it's not. It's not consistent, and it can cause interference, which is the worst thing, right? So get your own ID. Make sure you have your own ID. We don't have an answer for the club ID set. There's a lot of chatter about that right now. So on that, just for now, for you guys here today to program your radios, you do want to have your own ID. Doug?
So since Mike let the cat out of the bag a little bit, it has been raised the question regarding getting multiple IDs. And some radios work with the same ID across two radios, others don't. And my belief is that is actually due to a technical data translation that's happening in the repeater where you're actually transmitting up on time slot 1, but the repeater is sending your data back on the second. You're flip-flopped. They're inverted. And that not having a radio respond to its own ID is made for simplicity in your radio so it doesn't end up getting stuck. But why do you need an ID? You need an ID because you have to identify your radios. And many networks, including RMHAM, has interoperability out to other worldwide networks. If we were solely running isolated, a true island, if we were North Korea and put a wall around our network, we could use any ID we want. But we do interconnect data over to other networks. So for now, you need to use a radio ID approved identifier. And if you really need more than one, we can help you try to wrestle one out of them. Willem did some research and said they're only actually using, what, 4% of the, 3% of the identifiers. But if you're activating a cache that's going to be used only on RMHAM, we're working on a way to give somebody that has a dozen radios, a dozen identifiers, but we have to quarantine them to our network. It's crazy, but we're working on it.
Yeah. Now again, this only applies in special situations, right? For most users, you only need the one ID. Go to radioid.net, they'll give you one. It's not a problem, right? It's only when there hit special circumstances that pop outside the norm that becomes an issue. For most people, it won't be. Question, microphone?
Pretty loud, but this may be an edge case, but I just put in for a vanity call sign, and I've heard Logbook of the World is a nightmare to change your call sign over to. How hard is this to change to my new call sign?
When you get your new call sign, download your new copy of your license, email them at Radio ID, say, hey, my call sign's changed, can you change me in the database? And they'll go back, sure, done.
Okay.
Super simple. Now, here's the other side of this coin. The radio ID is for the DMR network. You still have to ID verbally when you transmit, every 10 minutes per FCC rules, because the radio ID is not a replacement for identifying your call sign. They are not the same. Why is that? Because I could go to the radioid.net database, pull down Doug's ID, right, his radio ID, put it on my radio and transmit, right? It'll still work, but now I'm using Doug's ID. Am I IDing my call sign? Nope. It's not the same. Not one of the same. So this is not a replacement for IDing yourself verbally when you call. Right? You'll notice when on if you've ever been on the DMR TechNet, every 10 minutes ID my call. Every time, right? Still has to be done. That's very, very important. It's not a replacement. This is for the utilization of the network and the way that DMR works. It has nothing to do with IDing your call sign. John.
There have been some people that have said, because it's you can look it up in a public database, that it's okay to use that as your ID. That is incorrect.
That is incorrect.
The FCC uses one database, their database. They do not use radioid.net. They refuse to do that. It is written in the rule. So use your verbal ID, or you're going to get in trouble.
By all means, please. All right. Yeah. All right, so you've got your radio, you've got your programming software, you've got your cable, you've got Windows machine, the software installed on it. You've gotten your radio ID down from radioid.net. Fantastic. Next. Okay, that's what I said before. What are you gonna program it? What are you gonna put it in? You're gonna go to a repeater? Great. So now you need the information about the repeaters that you want to contact. Right? We talked about the frequency pair, the color code, the talk groups on what repeater slots. And of course, we can do from there, we can build the receive group. But this is the information that you need about that DMR repeater in order to be able to communicate with it. Right? Where do you get this information? at the repeater owner's website, right? Which means you need to know where the website is, right? So you got to go to the site. Well, I know that the Denver Radio Club has some DMR repeaters. Go to the Denver Radio Club, go to the repeaters. Oh, there's the information. Just like any other repeater. There is a book, but as with most cases nowadays, as soon as a book is published, it's out of date. So that just, your mileage may vary. Our website has all the information about our repeaters on there, so that's where you can go to get information. Or if you have a radio that we have a supported sample code plug for, just pull down the sample code plug. It'll already be in there. Questions about this? Anybody? How long have we been going for? Gosh, already only 45 minutes. Excellent. Now, let's talk about the workflow. That is the quote for the class. In order to truly experience DMR freedom, you must know how to program your own radio. Right? No, you don't have to depend on anybody else for it. You can make your own changes, take the samples, modify them to your needs, make them need to do what you need it to do. All right, so first thing, radio ID. Does anybody recognize this software? That's a programming software for the Connect System CS750. Yes. So in this particular software, in the settings, under General Settings and Settings, you'll see Radio ID. Anybody want to guess whether or not that's the case for all radios? Of course not. So, your first assignment, open your CPS, find where your radio ID is put in. New laptop, who dis? I know I put it in here. There it is. That's not coming up now because I need to do this. Can I? What is this doing? Ba-doop, ba-doop. Undo that. There it goes. Just had to figure out how to exit out of it. All right. This is the Anytone software. You'll notice that the Anytone software on the left side there starts with common settings and then channels and zones and all that kind of good stuff, right? Where do you put in the freaking radio ID, people? Well, let's go down here to digital. And this doesn't have a radio ID in the settings. This has a radio ID list. And so when you can put in the radio ID 3108111. This is something that I think is unique to Anytone. You can actually have multiple radio IDs put into the CPS. Why would you want to do that? Because I want to pretend I'm Doug, obviously. I know. That's my number. But I could put in your number here and have it ready to go. You could. Yeah. Because again, this is a list. Now again, this is what I'm talking about. Every CPS is different. Right? We saw the Connect Systems one. This is the Anytone one. Has anyone that brought their CPS not been able to find where the radio ID is?
It came with the radio ID.
Did it? This is where the workshop comes in. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's pretty.
Oh, there it is.
Device ID.
I got it.
Yeah. And this is the Baofeng. The Baofeng calls it a device ID. Remember when I said they use different terms? Here we go.
So, Anytone.
Under digital, first listing is radio ID list.
Oh, sure enough.
There it is. Yep. Now, anybody else not been able to find the radio ID? Does anybody's radio ID say 12345 or 54321? Why do I ask that question? Because the RMHAM samples have that set as the radio ID And we always catch people who didn't change it because when they transmit, we see the radio ID as that. And we go, you didn't change your thing. All right? So radio ID goes in first. Do we have any hands up from the Zoom yet? Okay, very good. Now, it's important to understand when you're working with your CPS that the CPS works just like any other basic application like Word or Excel. You make a change, you save it, it saves it to a file. Okay? Which means that if you want to keep separate versions of your CPS, all you have to do is go to Save As and save it as a different file name. So you can go back and forth between different versions if that's what you want. So that still works that way. Okay? You have any problems here? We good? Okay. Any questions about the radio ID? Get in the habit is that when you're working your CPS, either the first thing you do on a new one, in a new code plug, put in your radio ID, or if you're opening one, go double check it. Okay? Now, here is the order of chow. Oh, sorry, Willem.
So before I start programming my radio, do I need to download the current stuff out of the radio and then start modifying that? Or can I just start a new code plug and just write it to the radio?
My favorite answer, that depends. And why is it? Because some softwares work differently. Some softwares won't actually let you do a new code plug. You can only edit it because they're dumb. But it's always a good idea, with that exception, when you get a new radio, just for giggles, read from the radio into your CPS and then save that file somewhere. Save it as default or original or open, whatever you want to name it, just in case things get really funky. Correct. Used to work until I programmed it. Well, go back. You can always bring your original one, put it back in, and start over from scratch. Right? So it's always a good idea to do that. Right? Now, there is a flow to this. Regardless of what radio you're using, with very few exceptions, because some of them are super dumb. Get that in a minute. There is a flow. Right? So like I said before, this is just, you need to know these things before you start. Okay? Right? Now, here's the important order. And this order matters because of the way that the code plug softwares work. First thing you add to your code plug after your radio ID are your talk groups. Go to your talk group list or your contact list, depending on what the CPS calls it in your software. Put in your talk groups first. Now, this is assuming you're building from scratch, right? Now, why is this? That is because two other things depend on this list being populated. First, what talk group you assign to your channel. And second, your receive groups. Because you don't just type the talk groups into receive groups, you select from the list. So if you need to select from a list, that list has to exist first. Okay? So the first thing you're going to do is add your talk groups. Second thing you're going to do, create your receive groups. Because before a receive group can be assigned to a channel, they have to be created. And you populate your receive groups from your talk group list. 99% of the CPSs I've worked with, this is the flow they use. There are some where you create every channel from scratch and you put this in manually every time and there's no list to put it in. You just have to do mindless data entry. It's annoying. But most of them do it this way. Okay? Now, the next thing you do, once you have your talk groups and your receive groups in, you can create the channels. Right? Create a channel, give it a name, assign it, the color code, which time slot or repeater slot you're communicating with, the talk group that you're putting it on, and then the receive group. You create your channels. Right? But we're not done. You've got your channels created. Congratulations. Now you actually have to tell the radio what groups of channels you want to have active. You do that with a zone. So you add your channels to a zone. You can have multiple zones in a single code plug. Okay? You can have channels in multiple zones, right? So what this allows you to do is do separate groupings of channels and have those activated depending on where you are. So if you're in northern Colorado, you can have one set of channels. If you're in Denver, you have another set of channels. If you're in southern Colorado, another set of channels. If you're in another state, you can have another zone with another set of channels. So you can just, instead of having to switch channels around, you just activate a different zone, and then you can choose between the channels in that zone. Okay, so you create the zones. So again, but you only have one zone active at a time, but a channel can be in multiple zones. Have I confused anybody yet? All right. So that's the work. This is the workflow. Make sure your talk groups are in first. Create your receive groups from your list of talk groups. Create your channels, and then organize your channels into zones as you need them. Right? Each one of these, the receive groups, the channels, and the zones, are all have names, so you can name it in a way that makes sense to you, so you don't confuse yourself. And again, I can encourage you to do this. Make sure your name, especially your zones, something that makes sense to you. Right? If it makes sense to Doug and it doesn't make sense to me, it's useless for me. Questions here? Willem.
Confused when you say a talk group is a contact list.
Right. So the contact list is an area inside the code plug that just has a list of things. And there's 3 things that go in the contact list. Talk groups, radio IDs, and the all call channel. Okay? So you have to have the talk groups in your contact list before you can assign them to channels. Okay? Now, we start talking about a big no-no here in amateur radio. This applies just to amateur radio. You can put your radio IDs in your contact list. Some CPSs, like the Anytones, have a separate section for radio IDs because there's so many of them. You can actually download the list from radioid.net, or if you know where to find them, there's pre-made lists that get created every day. That's a dump that is pre-formatted for your radio. Okay? Not all radios can handle all the radio IDs in radioid.net. Some of the later ones can. Okay? So what that does, very conveniently, right, is when they transmit and it comes to your radio, if you have that radio ID in your radio with a label, it'll show the label instead of the radio ID. So it's a really cool way of seeing who's transmitting according to the database instead of the radio ID and have to look it up yourself, right? I call myself a contact list junkie because I love that feature, right? And any radio that I have has to be able to hold a lot of contacts in there, right? Now, where this gets problematic, technically, you can assign a radio ID to the transmit of your channel. What does that do you think? Right? When that signal comes to a radio, like I'm transmitting a radio ID, right? Your radio is programmed to either do promiscuous mode or digital monitor, or to listen for specific talk groups before the keys up. If that radio ID comes through and doesn't match the radio ID in your radio, it's not going to key up. It'll only key up if the signal's radio ID that it's transmitting as the 2 transmit matches the radio ID in your radio. So essentially what you're doing is tying up an entire radio network just to get a private signal to one user. This is extraordinarily frowned upon in the amateur radio community, and RMHAM does not allow it. You will get a stern talking to if you try to do this. And we ask you very kindly and sternly not to do it. Talk groups only, right? Because you can tie up, because every one of those repeaters is going to be transmitting this out that's on that talk group, and nobody can get in just so you can talk to one guy. Don't do that, right? Private networks, hotspots, knock yourself out, but on public networks, it's bad, bad, bad juju. 40 repeaters in 3 states. So don't do it. So that's why you see the radio IDs in the contact list, right? Put them in there for your display. That's fine. Just don't transmit on them. Questions there?
Okay, so I'm still confused between what talk groups are and receive groups are and what the difference is.
Okay, so they're closely related. Okay, so a talk group is just it is a demarcation mark at the repeater slot that says I'm going to transmit on this group, and the only people that are listening on that group will hear me. Okay, the receive is the same thing, but the receive on your radio, right? So the receive group is I'm listening for this talk group, but because a talk group in a repeater can have multiple talk groups assigned to it, you need to be able to listen for all of them. So you put multiple talk groups in your receive group and assign that to the receive side of your channel, and that tells the radio, listen for all of these. Yes, exactly that. Correct. Encode, decode, in and out, transmit, receive. Any other questions? Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here. Okay. Now, this is a grid of some example channels. So you can kind of see this in a grid fashion and see how this works. We talked about in RMHAM land, we do one talk group per repeater slot. And you can see that here. So this is the same repeater. This is Thornton, right? But one channel is stored in Rocky Mountain. One channel is stored in Central, okay? And you can tell it's the same repeater because it has the same color code and it has the same frequency pair, right? But because we have a time slot 1 and a time slot 2, this ends up being 2 channels in your code plug. Okay? Now the difference between the 2 channels is 1, the time slot. They're separate time slots. And 2, the talk group that we program for the channel to talk on. Okay? So this is a very, very simple 1 talk group per repeater slot setup in RMHAM. Now you contrast this with this repeater no longer exists, but this is a Lee Hill repeater that we have that was, let's say, what's on DMR Mark. DMR Mark is one of those that's notorious for having multiple talk groups active on a single time slot. And you can see this here, right? This is 1 repeater. Same color code, same frequency pair. Okay, so it's the same repeater. But we can tell from this that on time slot 1, we have the worldwide English, and the North America talk groups, all in the same repeater slot. And we can also tell on time slot 2, we have local and mountain on the same repeater slot. This was a very, very common setup for DMR Mark repeaters in Colorado when they were more popular than they are now. Okay, so same repeater, 2 repeater slots, 5 channels, 1 per talk group. Because again, you're only limited to 1 talk group per channel on the transmit side. So if I say I wanted to transmit on North America, then I wanted to switch to mountain, I would either have to reprogram the channel or just create another channel with that setting and then switch to it. Okay? Doug.
And I just want to emphasize, this is an old example.
Yes.
Don't write this down. This was 5 years ago.
Yes.
No longer supported, but it's a great example
Yeah.
for sharing talk groups.
Yeah.
Because as Mike pointed out earlier, somebody's on Lee Hill Worldwide English, and you've got your knob set to Lee Hill North America, and you're wondering, why am I not hearing anything, and why can I not transmit? So, but this is a great example, but it's not real.
This is why this is why we put the example up here, just to illustrate that for you. Yes, microphone in the back.
In your table here,
Yep.
on the Lee Hill repeaters,
Repeater, it's 1 repeater.
repeater, what distinguishes all of those channels in the DMR Mark world? Again, we're not doing this anymore.
Right.
But each one of those descriptions of top groups has a unique top group ID. That's what's different?
Correct. Correct. Each one of these, so this is the English talk group name. Each one of these will have a talk group number associated with it, right? And you would put that into your contact list as such. Correct. I use the English bits. Doug only can talk in talk group numbers. He doesn't talk this. He talks talk group numbers. So you're talking, well, we'll just get on channel 700. Which one's 700? Yeah. There is no channel. There's only 700. In DMR world, when they use ID, it's like www.google.com versus the IP address. Same thing. Willem.
If somebody is talking on one of the other talk groups, is there any indication on my radio that that's happening?
That
Or do
depends.
I just transmit and then I get a bonk?
That depends on the radio. Most radios will have an activity light. It's the little blinky blinky thing right here, right? So if you're not hearing anything and you can't transmit and your blinky blinky light is blinky blinkings, that means there's activity going on there, and that's probably why you can't transmit. Yes, blinky blinky is a technical term. Now, one of the ways, there's two ways to get around this. One, look at the radio and look at all the talk groups that are on that time slot and make sure all those talk groups are in your receive group. So that when they transmit on the other talk groups, you'll hear it. You won't be able to transmit it unless you change the channel to transmit on that particular talk group, but you'll hear it. The other one is, like I said before, your digital monitor. So if you turn on digital monitor on your channel, any talk group that transmits from that repeater, you will hear. Comment in the back.
Do you want to mention admit criteria real quickly so that you don't?
We're getting into that.
Great.
We're going there. Yep. This is the basics. Everything after that is kind of can be radio specific, and sometimes it gets really confusing. The any tone is extraordinarily confusing. But
Hey,
we're getting
Mike?
there. Okay.
Hey, Mike?
Yep.
What if I'm in that previous example and I really, you made a very good point. I want to listen to Lee Hill local on this example.
Yep.
But I don't want to hear all the worldwide North America mountain. How do I do that so that my radio isn't constantly babbling at me?
So the first thing is
I would
you
do
turn
two.
off. So let me get that
Yeah.
one. First thing is
Get
you
that
turn
one.
off digital monitor. Second, you only put the one talk group in your receive group, and you will only hear when local transmits.
But if I need that for checking if the channel's clear, I might want to program 2 channels in my radio so I can click over to one channel and
Yeah.
go, oh, that's why I'm not getting in. Somebody's on here. I'm going to click back and I'll just come back so that I don't have to listen to
Yeah.
somebody talking about how to bake a bundt cake.
So you can do single talk group programming, so you can put a single talk group in your receive group for every channel, and then just manually do that. I find it easier to put the other one in. The choice is yours. There's no wrong or right way to do that. Yes, it's much more convenient. Just turn it off and then turn it on and then turn it back off. Yes. Yes.
I was given a message from the viewing audience, and
Uh-oh.
they decided for whatever reason to give it to me to ask. And you may want to defer this one, but let's make sure we answer it at some point. A question is, can I just create my own talk group on a repeater and give it to my buddy?
No, do not do that. Absolutely do not do that. That's one of the great ways to get you banned from repeaters. If you need to do that, do your own repeater or get some hotspots. And then, like, for example, like the Anytone, they actually have a hotspot client server set up, and you can connect 2 hotspots together and have your own little private network. Do it that way. Do not try to do this on public repeaters. Do not do that. All right, we're at about an hour in. Do we want to take a break? So 10-minute break. 10-minute break. Be back here 10 minutes till. Yes. So do we have any questions come in on the Zoom? Any questions in the room before we continue? All right, where's my presentation? There it is. Okay. So as we say every Thanksgiving, before we start eating, let's dig in. We're going to just review this very quickly, and we're going to go in order of our order of chow, right? So talk groups, go into your contact list first, okay? So talk groups are access control, analogous to tones, but on a repeater slot basis, okay? If your repeater, and most do, if your repeater uses talk groups, you must know what talk groups are available on that repeater. Okay? Talk groups are assigned to repeater slots, so pay attention to which repeater slot the talk group is on, please. As we said, more than one talk group could be on a single repeater slot, but only one talk group can be used in the slot at a given point in time. Bear that in mind. We've gone over that several times now. Okay? Now, what does the contact list look like? Or what is it used for? I think we preempted this question before. Okay? So the private calls for the radio IDs, we talked about those. The talk groups, we definitely have talked about those. And this thing called all call. all call does exactly as you would think it would. Anytime a radio receives a transmission with the all call as the transmit on it, your radio will open up and you will hear it. Don't use it. You will make people very upset. Unless you're on a private channel between two radios direct, all calls is a very simple way of just setting up a simplex conversation, right? Just don't do it on a repeater, please. All right, now we talked about this as well. If you have the radio ID in your contact list and have a tag or a label associated with it in your radio, has to be in your radio, and that radio ID transmits to you, that label will show up on your screen instead of the radio ID. It's very convenient. Okay? Any questions about the contact list? Willem?
So if I put in the wrong talk group on a repeater, will that repeater retransmit it or will it lock me out?
Depends on how it's set up, but most times, yes. It will retransmit it out, and that will cause interference. So make sure that you are doing it right. Did I mention that we have samples for you to use? Yes, you will get a phone call. All right. Now, again, this is the CS750 or CS800 example. It's under, again, I didn't make these decisions. This is the way they decided to do it in the software. Under conventional DMR services, contact. Your next assignment, find the contact list in your CPS. If you have any trouble finding it, let me know. While you're doing that, I'm going to bring up something for you Anytone guys. Because Anytone does theirs a little differently. So if you have an Anytone, pay attention. Under digital, right under your radio ID, you'll notice that you have a contact talk group list. It is exactly what you expect. They're asking you here for your talk groups. This is where you put in your talk groups. If you want to put in radio IDs, don't put your radio IDs here, Anytone people. There's a separate section for that called the digital contact list. This is where you put in your radio IDs. You will also notice there's a heck of a lot more columns here than just a radio ID and a label. If you populate this, this information will show up on your screen when these people transmit to you. Now, I know you guys love putting in individual talk groups, and I mean radio IDs. If you have it Anytone, if you go to powerworks.com, I believe it is, okay? Scroll to the bottom, go to software downloads. At the bottom of the screen, you'll notice this DMR contact CSV file, okay? On a daily basis, PowerWorks downloads the entire DMR radio ID list worldwide, formats it into a convenient CSV for you, and publishes it here on their website. So you can download that CSV file, pop back over here to your CPS, tool, import, and it is the digital contact list. Point that at your download and it'll suck it into your radio, and you can push it up to your radio. Now, I will warn you, there's a danger here, okay? The first danger is that your radio doesn't have enough space for all the contacts. If you have a more recent one, 878 or 8782, you should be fine. Now, this is the more important part. Download the list, push it to your radio, and then close your code plug without saving. And the reason why that is that if you save it with all of those radio IDs in there, it is going to bloat your code plug, and everything you do to program in that code plug after that will take forever to do because it loads the whole thing into memory, and it sucks. Okay. So download it, import it into the code plug, push the contact list, just the contact list to your radio because it's in a separate memory section. And you do that when you hit push to radio, and then close the code plug without saving it. You will save yourself hours of frustration. Ask me how I know. Sir.
I think there's a checkbox when you go to.
Yes. It's a contact list or everything else. Just do the contact list. Just to push the contact list up, you can just do it by itself.
Can't you just not use that the next time you program the radio?
No, because it'll still save it in the code plug and everything else will be slow. Yeah. Trust me. Willem.
What happens if I don't want to wait and I just turn the radio off and turn it back on again?
While you're pushing it up,
Yes.
you could cause some, you could brick your radio in some cases. Some radios are more resilient than others. I do not recommend that you try it. I highly recommend that you make sure that your battery is fully charged before you push it up to avoid that very issue. Do not interrupt a transfer in progress. Has anybody here not been able to find their contact list? Has anybody here not been able to find their contact lens? I've done that. Okay. So, if you haven't already, let me see if what was that slide? Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Does everybody remember the contact that needed to put in from the information I gave you before? The Brandmeister Rocky Mountain 3108. If that's not in your code plug for your exercise today, go ahead and add it. Again, this is a talk group, not a radio ID. Put it in the talk group / contact list section. Yes.
Clarify for the Anytone world the difference between the contact / talk groups and the digital contact list.
Yeah, so the contact / talk group is just for talk groups. Talk groups only, no radio IDs. The digital contact list is for radio IDs, simple as that. And that's because there are far, far more potential radio IDs. And so they put that in a separate section in the code plug list. And it's a separate section in the memory on your radio. So you can just update the contact list for the radio IDs or the rest of the radio or both at the same time. You have that choice. You don't have to do both every time, which is very, very cool.
That feature is unique to the Anytones.
It is. It is. And that's why I have one. That's why I stick with the Anytones, just for that feature. That is my radio religion. All right. Receive groups. Again, very, very similar to the talk groups, right? And again, depending on your radio, this may be more necessary than others, okay? So the receive groups are how DMR radios use talk groups from receiving signals. You assign talk groups to your receive group list, and then you assign that receive group list to the channel. Yes. Okay. So the copy of the presentation is up on the website now, so you can go to the rmham.org site, go to RMHAM-U, look at the syllabus, and download the presentation for today. And again, because you can have more than one talk group on a repeater slot, it's convenient to put more than one talk group in your receive group to match that, so that you know when the repeater is transmitting. Or if you don't want to be bothered by it, don't put it in there. It's your choice. Some radios do bypass the need for receive groups. It's still best practice to put them in there. So in our samples, we always do. And remember, this is the way it is because this is a commercial radio protocol. It's not an amateur radio protocol. It's just the way it is. Okay, here's our example. This again is the Connect System software. You'll notice under DMR services, we have our contacts and then our receive group list. We have several different receive group lists in here, right? All you do is you create a new list, you give it a name, and then from the available talk groups in your contact list, you choose which of those to put in your receive group. This is why you have to populate your contact list first, okay? Questions on this? Find your receive groups in your CPS. Will?
So do you just put every possible talk group in your receive group, or do you want to limit it?
You could, theoretically. It's not good programming practice, but theoretically you could. I'm not sure. I have not found a limit of how many of these you can put in a receive group yet. Your CPS may have a limit of the number of talk groups you can put in your receive group. If so, you'll need to make sure that you maintain that. And of course, a lot of this becomes moot when you talk about digital monitor. So again, we're learning the right way to do it, so then you can decide whether or not you want to break that rule or not.
So do you just put, what do you put in the receive group? Just
So
everything?
you're generally speaking, you're doing one receive group per, again, depending on either per talk group on a repeater, per talk group in a repeater network, right? Because again, you can only have to create RMHAM, the RMHAM's Rocky Mountain talk group once, right? You can create the receive group with just that in there once and then assign it to multiple channels, right? So at a minimum, you're going to have, generally speaking, one receive group per repeater slot available in a radio network. It can get a little confusing, but as you go through and you look at your channels, you'll know, okay, for this one, I'll need these in. Oh, that's the same as that one. I don't need to recreate that and go forward. This can get a little daunting. It's why digital monitor exists.
So if you only use the RMHAM network and you have 700, 720 and so forth,
Correct.
is the best practice to have those talk groups in there and have a set of receive groups that have just those in there? Or is there an advantage to combining all of those into all RMHAM receive talk groups?
The right way is for any given repeater slot on any given repeater, you should have just the talk groups that repeater slot transmits on that time slot. That's the proper way to do it. If you want to get lazy, one receive group, throw all your talk groups in it, call it done. Just assign that to all your channels. It works, okay? It's not prim and proper and kind of thing, but it works. And if it works and it doesn't bother anybody else, and it makes it easier for you, by all means. I do that very thing on Brandmeister. Because Brandmeister is a whole other concept. But today, for proper use, one of these strategies will work better for you.
Is there wildcard characters or
No.
a prefix?
No.
So you have to be exact.
Yes. Wildcarding in a commercial standard? Are you kidding? If only. All right, so find your receive group, create either a workshop or Brandmeister or Brandmeister Colorado receive group, and add your Brandmeister Colorado talk group into it. Raise your hand if you need help. Any questions from the Zoom? Okay. Awful quiet. Anyone need more time? Yes. Double click on that. Give that receive group a name. And I actually don't have any talk. I have contact one as a talk group in here. Pop it over. Hit OK. There's your receive group. Correct. Yes. Can you? Yes. Should you? That's a question you have to ask yourself. You can be lazy about it, but then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and not knowing that you were lazy about it. I can live with myself while doing that. All right. We've got our talk groups. Talk group. We have a receive group. We are now ready to program a channel. Hallelujah. So there's a lot of software that looks like this. From what I understand, the Motorola CPS screen for a channel looks similar to this. You've got your kind of universal settings here. You got your receive settings here. You've got your transmit settings here. Okay? What you need, first of all, give your channel a name that makes sense. For me, this is Hotspot Brandmeister, Colorado, or whatever you can actually fit in whatever your CPS allows. Okay? So that you know what, because that's what's going to show up on your screen when you click over to it. So it needs to make sense. Here's your color code. Make sure you have the color code set correctly. There's your slot. Slot 1 or slot 2. Time slot, repeater slot. Okay? On the receive side, what should the receive frequency be? If we're talking repeaters.
Peter?
Should be the transmit frequency from the repeater. The repeater is transmitting, the radio is receiving. Ask me how I know this. Ask me how embarrassed I got when I got these backwards. I was a young ham once. Okay? Again, this is the connect systems here. You notice on the receive side, we have a selection for receive group list. It's a pull-down menu. Where does that pull-down menu get populated from? The receive groups we added in before. That's why we had to do those first. Transmit side. We have our transmit frequency. What should our transmit frequency be in our radio? The receive frequency on the repeater. Very good. This is where that -5 millihertz comes from. And down here, in the Connect System software, the talk group that you're transmitting on is called the transmit contact. It doesn't discriminate between talk groups and radio IDs. So it just calls it the transmit contact. If it's one of these like double people kind of things, it's a talk group. If it's a single person looking icon, it's a radio ID. Don't do that. So that's where you set that. Okay? Now, did I actually fill this out? We talked about color code, repeater slots. Yes, I did. Very good. Whoop. So for my example channel, this is I think this is either Thornton or Squaw, or whatever they're calling it today. Here is the color code 7. There's the slot. There's the receive frequency, which is the transmit frequency of the repeater. There's the Rocky Mountain receive group, done properly. Transmit side is the receive frequency in the repeater, and there's my transmit contact, which is the Rocky Mountain talk group, okay, as an example. All right, for you Anytone guys, let's look at a channel. Now, let me have to get to the right screen so I can actually exit out of it. Now, this is where things get fun. So that's what it looks like in Anytone. They do it differently, obviously. Up at the top, you have your transmit and receive frequency, so they group them together, okay? You have to choose what kind of channel you're programming, whether it's analog or digital, right? In the Connect systems, there's a different section for those channels. Here, they put it in the channel spec itself, right? Transmit power, bandwidth. If you're doing a DMR channel, that has to be narrowband. If you do analog, you can do narrowband or wideband, okay? We'll talk about the transmit permit in a little bit. Now, from there, they split it out. There's an analog section at the bottom, if you choose analog in the channel type. If you choose digital, the digital section is on the other side. Now, I told you about my favorite quirk, right, where the pull-down menu is actually a button. This is where this manifests. The contact, it's called the contact in Anytone. That is your talk group. And to select the talk group, you actually have to click on this button, and each one of your talk groups shows up in a grid for whatever reason. And then to select your particular contact that you want, you double click on the grid square to select your contact. Because I guess a pull down just wasn't good enough for them. I don't know. Quirk of the CPS, right? Now, we know, also said, you notice in the Anytone you can have multiple radio IDs in an Anytone radio, right? Oh, look, a pull down menu. So if you have multiple radio IDs, and most people don't, you can actually pull that down and choose which radio ID you're going to transmit with when you're on this channel. That's a feature that's pretty unique to the Anytone. Most people, the vast majority of people, never need to use that feature, but it's there. Once we get past that, things get normal. You've got your color code, your slot, and your receive group. Again, we chose our talk group with the button grid thing, okay? But after that, everything gets normal, okay? Questions so far?
Okay, so if I'm in my winter quarters,
Your who to wetters?
winter quarters,
Winter quarters, your QTH, okay?
so if I go to the channel and I create a channel with the local frequencies to a local DMR repeater, the talk group 700 is unique. And so I could go with a talk group, Rocky Mountain Talk Group, and get into Rocky Mountain Talk Group from any DMR repeater anywhere.
No, absolutely not. That's not how that works, okay?
Okay.
So there are multiple repeater networks. We've talked about a few of them today. The Rocky Mountain Network, the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio Network, right? Rocky Mountain Ham Radio Network, the Brandmeister Network, the DMR Network. There are other networks, okay? When I say you need to go to the repeater owner website and find out what talk groups are on there, that's very important, right? Because unless they've set up some kind of funky bridge between the two, each one of these networks are isolated amongst themselves, okay? So if you transmit on a talk group on Rocky Mountain, you're not going to be going out to 700 on Brandmeister. That's not the way that works, okay? So if you come to a repeater, and you look at it, it's like 700 is not on there. That's a good indication that's not a Rocky Mountain Ham Radio repeater, okay? Only 3 states and 40 repeaters, okay? So each network within themselves, Brandmeister, Rocky Mountain Ham Radio, DMR and Mark, right, will have their own talk group scheme. And if you want to participate in that network, you need to know where those repeaters are, make sure you can reach them, and program your radio accordingly.
So just a clarification on what John said. Another repeater system could have 700.
Correct.
Okay. So it is not unique to the Rocky Mountain.
Correct.
It's just unique to that system that you were on.
Correct. Right. I've actually had someone email me saying that they noticed that another repeater network, I forget which one it was, is one of the ones that is in another area, was using the same number as one of the RMHAM ones, and he couldn't put them both in his code plug because the talk group numbers in your code plug are unique, and it won't let you create duplicates. He was trying to figure out how to work around that, and I basically gave him just make the label so that you know that's both, right? Just create your label something / something else or something - something else so that you know that it's both, and then program accordingly, because there's no other way really to get around that without maintaining 2 separate code plugs. It gets kind of weird, right? So each one of these radio networks is unique. Now, we do have a bridge between Brandmeister and RMHAM. It's on the website, but we use separate talk group numbers depending on which way you're going in, right? So we have our 700 series numbers when you're on an RMHAM repeater, but if you go to Brandmeister, the numbers are different. It's 3108 something, 310801 or 13 or 16 or something like that. It's a different number, which means that if you transmit with that number on Brandmeister, it'll come out the repeaters on the associated talk groups on our network. I think we have North and South and Central on Brandmeister that way. So you can go in both ways, right? But only those 3, okay? Hotspots are a completely different discussion. Okay. So the key with the hotspot is, what network are you connected to? Can you connect the hotspot to the RMHAM network? No, you cannot. We don't allow it, right? Can you connect the hotspot to Brandmeister? Yes. Can you get onto those 3 RMHAM channels, 3 RMHAM talk groups from Brandmeister through your hotspot? Yes, you can. To the back way, which is the best way. All right. So, does that answer the question? Right? So if you just put 700 randomly into your channel onto like an unknown repeater, The best thing that you can expect for is you're going to get that repeater owner's going to get upset with you because it's not on there, right? Talk to the repeater owner, see what he does, what network it's on, what talk groups are there, and program accordingly. Please. That's not common sense. It is standard courtesy, etiquette and courtesy. Yes, Doug.
I think Mike brings up some great points here and has had a pretty good technical explanation. 10 years ago, when we developed our RMHAM network, we tried to find talk group numbers that weren't likely to be used anywhere else in the world. As the ham DMR network was set up to have unique user radio identifiers, unique repeater identifiers, and unique talk groups, because they envisioned that the two, we might cross the streams on the multiple networks. So think of our talk group 700, if we named that Rocky Mountain. It's the same thing of, I don't know if we have multiple Bobs in this room, but Rocky Mountain is the first name and RMHAM network is the last name.
Yep.
You can go talk on 700 on radio network A over here, and we can be talking on talk group 700 on radio Z on the other side, and it's not a problem. So,
But there's no guarantee,
but
there's nothing to say that those two 700s are going to be able to be talking to each other.
But Rocky
Right.
Mountain Ham is not totally, I use the example North Korea, just we don't have the evil dictator. We do have a sea bridge, and that bridge routes us to select other places so that we do have to play by the worldwide standard.
Yep.
And one way that I kind of put this in my head that helps, if you're sitting here going, I think I get it, but I'm not totally sure. Our DMR routing is very similar to IP routing. We have addresses, we have bridges, we have gateways, we have network address translation.
Yep.
Is there anything prohibiting you from within your house saying, I'm going to make my TiVo TV 8.8.8.8?
Right.
Well, as long as it doesn't leave your house, you can do that. But in our case, we do have intentional holes in the firewall,
Yep.
and we do transport some things out. So just because you can put it in your radio, you may end up talking to your hotspot on 700,
Yep.
Rocky Mountain wide, but it's not going to get to the other end.
Yeah. The way that I was saying, if I had to put a general statement, is that they're not necessarily unique, but they're not universal. Right? So 700 on RMHAM is not going to be 700 on Brightmaster, it's not going to be 700 DMR Mark. They mean different things on different networks, so you have to know what that is and be educated. Yeah.
I think another way to say this that helps make it sense is just like where we started from. DMR is a commercial protocol.
Yep.
So if Acme Manufacturing wanted to set up a DMR network for their campus,
Yep.
they're free to do that and use any talk group they would want. And the next company down the street, if they wanted to set up a DMR network, they could do that and use any set of talk groups that they wanted. It is unique and independent.
Yep. You would have to go through a lot of efforts. Let's say the Coke DMR network and the Pepsi DMR network. Let's say both of those networks use 700. Could they make those 700s go across networks? Sure, it would take a lot of work, but why would they want to? You don't want your Coke people talking to your Pepsi people, right? So you can have 700 here, and on each one of those networks, it would work. But the 700 on Pepsi would only go to Pepsi people, 700 on Coke would only go to Coke people, right? And within their network. Okay? They're not universal. They don't all cross the streams. We're not all one big network.
Well, and that's a good point, Mike. And you pointed out there was one network that Network A used the same number as Network B.
Yep.
The real confusion exists in our user radio because we're putting in a number to a name code. I like to use numbers, as Mike pointed out. He likes to use names. Problem is names change,
Correct.
and when I'm working in the C bridge to patch all this,
The numbers never
it
do.
works from numbers
Yeah.
and it doesn't work from names.
Correct.
So I make less errors doing that.
Absolutely.
But we originally, as opposed to using 700 for our Rocky Wide and 720 for our Central, we were going to use the DMR Mark Brandmeister international numbers. But people said, well, how am I going to tell the difference when my radio is over on a different network and it says Brandmeister, Colorado versus your Colorado?
Right.
So we said, we're just going to go to a different set of numbers that aren't likely used here.
Yep.
Kind of, it's like that Volkswagen commercial where they went over and they licked the car to market. So we've kind of put our marking on that and said, you know, you're welcome to use it, but please don't if you're a ham.
Yeah.
Because it's going to confuse the new ham.
This all comes, like I said, because the DMR is a commercial radio protocol. We're shoehorning it in to amateur radio, and these kind of things that we have to work around just come with the territory. Okay? So, your next assignment, create your channel. Make sure you give it a name that makes sense. Again, the channel that we're programming here is for Brandmeister. So it is the Brandmeister Colorado Talk Group. And we're doing this on my hotspot frequencies here. So you need to make sure you create your channel with a name that makes sense. Put in the frequency pairs appropriate. Now, anytime that if you look at the spec that I gave you a frequency and an offset. Which frequency did I give you? Yeah, but which frequency is that? The transmit or the receive? No. Whenever you see a number like that, more often than not, generally speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is the frequency that you listen to when you want to listen to the repeater. So that is the repeater transmit frequency. Where does that frequency go? In the CPS, correct. So your radio will have a receive frequency and a transmit frequency, right? This is the radio. So the frequency I gave you was the repeater transmit. That needs to go into the radio receive. That's why it's at the top. So you need to create the channel, give it a name, put in your appropriate receive and transmit frequencies, assign the correct talk group to the transmit side, and assign the correct receive group to receive side. Once we get there, we'll talk about other things. This has been some really good discussion today. Very, very good. Every network can start over with their talk group numbering. So you have to be very, very conscious of, okay, this repeater is great. What network is this repeater on? Or is this an isolated repeater? And is the repeater owner going to get upset with me if I use different talk groups? Go to the website, read the information, educate yourself on that repeater. It happens. We'll find you. You do enough where it interferes with people, we will find you. It's far, far more old school than that, DMR is. The only reason why our repeaters connect to each other is, generally speaking, because of the existence of IP Site Connect, which is a Motorola feature, not a DMR spec thing, right? And what it essentially does at the end of the day, especially when we use an intermediate technology called C-Bridge, we tie talk groups to talk groups. So the talk group, somebody keys up on the talk group here, it keys up on the talk group over here. And they don't have to even be on the same repeater slot on other repeaters. It can mix and match. We don't do that because it's much simpler to maintain. We like to keep it simple. There are a couple, there used to be an exceptions. I don't think there's any exceptions anymore. But yeah, so it's just, so somebody talks on talk group here, people listen on talk group here, and vice versa. Willem.
So I'm confused about the receive group. Why is the receive group none?
Because I'm an assigned one. This is a blank code plug. Did I create a receive group? I think I might have. Yeah, there it is. Now it's test. Because I named my receive group test. Comment. Question.
Yeah, so on this topic, in at least Motorola CPS and maybe some others, you can actually leave the receive group blank if the only thing you want to receive is the same talk group as your transmit contact. It's a little shortcut.
We teach you the proper way
Yeah.
how to do it here, and you can choose to do it other ways after that. But you have to know the rules before you know how to break the rules.
Yeah, if this confuses you, ignore me and listen to what Mike
it's
says.
all good. Because again, if your radio supports digital monitor, you can leave that receive group blank and just leave your monitor on all the time. You'll hear everything, but it's easier. So how much work do you want to put into it, and what do you want to listen to? It's your choice. I'm here to teach you how to do it properly. If you choose to do it another way, just don't cause interference. All right.
So there's 6 million other buttons.
Yes, there are.
What the heck do I do?
We're getting there. We're getting there. In fact, I think I want to go back first to the other one because it's a little simpler. We haven't even gotten to zones yet. Give me you. There you are. All right. Where is it? Okay. There are some other things on the channel. Not everything here is applicable. Some things here, if you mess with it, you won't be able to transmit effectively, so use your own risk. Some things that you do want to be aware of. Scan list. We're not going to go deep into scan lists, but there is such thing as the scan list. What is the scan list? Anybody? Correct. It is a list of channels to scan. Now, where this gets fun in DMR, with few exceptions, my old Vertex standard is one of those, but generally speaking, the way that you do this in a DMR radio, twofold. One, you create the scan list. How do you create a scan list? You go to the scan list section, there's a section, create a new list, give it a name, and then you add channels to that scan list. Simply means is that when you activate the scan, those are the channels that get scanned. The second thing that you have to do is that you have to assign that scan list to a channel. Which means that if you want every channel to be activate that scan list, you have to assign that scan list to every channel. Here's where the chaos comes in. You ready? Every channel, theoretically, depending on how much work you want to put into this and how much chaos you want to bring to yourself, every channel can have a separate scan list. Isn't that great? Your scan list strategy will depend entirely on how much trouble you want to cause for yourself. Okay? Plan accordingly. Because you could do that. I don't recommend it because you'll be tearing your hair out. It's like, which scan list do I assign to this channel? Why am I scanning channels in Mexico when I'm in the United States kind of thing? Right? But that's what the scan list is. So in DMR, every channel has a potential scan list assignment. You can leave it as none, which means when you hit the button, nothing will happen. But that's where you assign that scan list to the channel. Okay? Does the channel that you're on have to be in the scan list? No, it does not. Okay? So, all kinds of fun and chaos things there. Anybody confused on that? It's very straightforward and has a lot of potential for chaos. Okay? Which leads us to the next button, which is the auto scan start. What do we think that does? When? As soon as you switch to that channel, it starts to scan. Use at your own risk. RX only. What do you think that does? Does allow you to transmit. Does anyone here not know what talk around is? So, on a repeater, you have a transmit and receive, right? You find out someone in the next area over to you is the one you're talking to on the repeater. You can hit talk around, and what it'll do is that the radio will now transmit on the receive channel instead of the transmit channel, which will bypass the repeater and allow you to basically do simplex between two radios. Correct. So what that means is that you're not going through the repeater anymore, so nobody through the repeater will hear you, but it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Yes. Yeah, but otherwise you'll go through the repeater again. This does not activate talk around. This enables you to use talk around on the channel. If you uncheck this box and you have a talk around button signed, when you hit talk around, nothing happens. So that's a little confusing. It just enables the talk around feature. It does not set it to the talk around function. It enables you to use talk around on that channel. Lone worker is a commercial feature that you'll never use in amateur radio. Vox, everybody know what Vox means? Voice activated. I don't recommend this, especially in noisy environments, because you'll be transmitting all the time. You won't even know it. All right. All these emergency alarm and emergency call indication, encryption like that, that's all, again, commercial features. You can ignore those safely. Reference frequency, if you have whatever is set by default in your radio, don't change it. Okay? Emergency system we don't use. Power level. Anybody here not know what power level means? What's the standard? Always use the lowest power that you need to get to affect communication. Time out time, infinite. You can set these. It's like you can set it to like 120 seconds, and after 120 seconds, it'll cut you off. You have to retransmit, depending on what your particular thing is. The one that you have to really pay attention to is this: the transmit emit or admit. Transmit admit. That's like admittance, like going into somewhere. On the any tones, this is called transmit permit. TX permit on any tones, TX admit on most others. Again, different CPSs, different terms, because why not? Admit criteria, also in the in some of the other radios as well, because I've seen that before. What does this mean? This is tied to the color code, more often than not. It means, when am I allowed to transmit? If you set this to always, the radio's not going to care what's going on. You hit the button, it's just going to start transmitting. That's the annoying way. Channel free means that no other radio or repeater can be transmitting on that frequency for you to transmit. Repeater tails. So if your repeater has a tail and it keeps transmitting that tail after somebody stops transmitting, and you have your channel set to channel free, you won't be able to transmit until the tail drops. It's annoying. There are better ways. Now this is where it can get confusing, depending on your radio. In the Connect systems, the setting that you want for your DMR channels is color code free. Okay? So the repeater will still be transmitting on the frequencies a signal, but when the digital signal drops, it no longer is transmitting the color code. So you can respond and key up in the tail and still be able to transmit back. This is the correct setting for Connect systems. Okay? What is it on your TYT?
It's admit criteria, and it just says color code.
Color code is the correct choice. Same thing. Okay? Maybe or maybe not. So, this is, I've batted back and forth on this several times, because any tones have different color code and same color code. And unfortunately, the contextual help down here, which usually has some helpful info, has nothing on this particular setting. I have seen this both ways on the forums and on the internet about which one of these you should use. Okay? Now, the text that I've seen says that if you set it to different color code, that is, if the signal that it is receiving matches your frequency pair, but the color code is different, it'll still allow you to transmit. In my mind, this is no different than always. So I believe now that the correct setting is same color code. And I'm about to change these on the code plugs. Because that means is that if it's the same frequency and the same color code transmitting, it won't let you go. I have to go back and study the wording on the help very carefully before I make that decision. But for now, I think it was different allows you, then same allows. I don't know. It's just, we're going to look this up. All right, we're going to workshop this. This is a workshop. This is what we do.
So while you're doing that, if you have two people that set their radios to always, and they both transmit at the same time, what happens?
Ask me that question when I'm not paying attention. Okay, here's the wording. Okay, we're going to workshop this together. Allow transmit when the receive match signal, but different color code. And the key here is allow transmit. Okay, let's think about this for the same color code. Allow transmit when received match signal and same color code. So if the color code matches, it'll allow. Because this says allow, not disallow, same color code is the same as always. Am I reading that wrong? Chinese radios, guys.
Also be Chinese English.
Now, here's a guy named Phil who's given us a useful comment. Different color code, or color code free, which is on Motorola, unless you're on Simplex. So I think I was correct the whole time. Should be different color code. Because it'll transmit if the color code is different, but it won't transmit if the color code is the same, which is what you want to avoid doubling. Okay? Okay. Workshop. So for here, for your channel, for best practice, you want different color code for DMR general practice on Anytones, which is what it is in the code plugs, which means that I went through this process before 3 years ago and came to the same conclusion. So that's good. Okay.
However, what that suggests is if somebody puts the wrong color code in their radio, they can transmit over you, or you can transmit over them.
They could transmit on the same frequency. It's just would the repeater pick it up? Because the color code doesn't match. Okay. That's most of it. Now, again, because Anytone likes to change the game for no reason whatsoever, there's one other thing you need to be aware of for the Anytone radios. And that is DMR mode. DMR mode does not exist in the DMR spec for what that I can tell. It's something they made up. I don't know why they did this, but okay. Just here's the thing. If you are communicating to a repeater or a hotspot and not directly to another radio, set this to repeater. Ask me how I know this. I released a code plug when they made this change without realizing they had made the change, and everything was set to DML simplex and none of the code plugs worked. They couldn't get the repeaters. Why? Just leave it alone. All right. So, huh?
Interesting. RT Systems is a software for RT Systems has released a software for the Anytones, and that is not in one of their selections.
Something to be said for sticking with the native CPS. That's my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. Here's the other thing. How much does the RT Systems Anytone software cost?
$30.
How much does this cost? Okay, just saying. Now, no downer on RT Systems. I have plenty of their software for some of my other radios. So don't take that as don't buy RT Systems. In this particular case, if all the settings aren't there, you might have to make a choice based on that. Okay, so program your channels. If you're using Anytone, make sure you've got these particular settings set correctly. Okay? And let's move on to our final bit, badoink, which is zones. At the end of the day, what are zones? Huh? Well, go a little bit more simple. It's a list of channels. Right? A zone is just a list of channels. Okay? You assign channels to a zone. Only one zone can be active in your radio at a given time. On HTs and some models, this was something new for me, I have to be honest, right? the channels correspond with the channel selection dial, right? My old amateur radio HTs didn't have a channel selection dial, right? That was a commercial thing. Wonder why they did that with DMR, all right? Some of these dials are absolute. Let's say you have 16 channels. It'll go to the 16th channel and stop, come back to the first channel and stop, right? Those are absolute. Some of them are not. Some just keep going. And when you get to the end of the channel list, you click it again, it goes to the start of the channel list. The only way you're going to find out is by testing it with your own radio, okay? They're different. Doesn't mean one's better than the others, just they're different, okay? You can have multiple zones. Like I said, you can have one zone for every area that you travel to so that you can always have a set of channels you can talk on when you get there, okay? Channels can be members in more than one zone, right? It's just pick from a list, pick from a list, okay? Any questions on zones? Now here's the important part. You can't skip this step because if you don't create a zone, your radio won't function. So you have to have at least one zone with channels in it so they can have one active. So let's take a look. Ba-doop-ba-doo. Doop-doop-doop-doo. In the Anytone software, in most softwares, there's a section for zones, right? What do? Create a zone, give it a name. Cute zone name, right? Add your channels to the zone. That's really all you have to do. Question?
Is there a way to select a channel from your radio that's not in a zone?
No. However, there's a way around that.
Channels in a zone.
No, well, most radios you can't do that. There's another way around that. We talked about the feature earlier. It's a sneaky way of doing it. Put it in a scan list, assign it to the channel. It's funky and it doesn't always work well, but it's another way to do it. So, you've got your zone, right? So go create your zone now. Call it your workshop zone or whatever. Put your channel in it and save it. And just click OK.
Mike, you had
Certainly.
mentioned before on the Anytone and the DMR mode as repeater. So when you're putting it in your simplex channels, do you select simplex?
Correct. Yep. Now here's the fun part that we didn't really talk about here since we're at the end now. Most DMR radios will support analog channels as well. We kind of hinted at that when we looked at setting digital versus analog on the channel, right? So you can have your analog channels in. You can mix and match your analog and digital channels in zones. You don't have to choose, which is great, right? So there's that as well. Let's talk about some other things. We talked about the scan list. So in DMR, you create a list of, again, a list of channels. Call it a scan list. Assign it to the channel. Every channel can have its own scan list, or you can have it universal depending on how you want to do, right? The other topic that typically comes up is roaming. So what is roaming? This is and while you're programming your zone and getting that ready, we can talk about zoning, roaming. So roaming is, again, another list of channels. And what your radio will do in one way or another, the technical details of this really doesn't matter unless you really want to get into it, but what it does is that it determines in some way which of those channels has the strongest signal from the repeater, and then it tunes you to that channel. Okay? In concept, it's very, very straightforward. However, hold on. You're getting ahead of me. Here comes the problem. Let's say I have all these channels, and all these channels are on different talk groups. Rocky Mountain, Central, North, DMR Mark, Brandmeister. And I throw all of them into a talk group, or into a roaming list, and hit go. What happens? You have no idea what talk group or radio network you're going to be talking on when that stops and hits, unless you look, right? In that scenario, in my humble opinion, the feature is utterly useless. Now, there is a use for it, but in order for that feature in the world of amateur radio to be useful, the use case is this. You need to stay on one talk group, but you need to move around. right? So say you're covering some kind of emergency event, you're going north-south in your car to northern Colorado, southern Colorado, and you need to stay on the strongest repeater on Rocky Mountain Talk Group. That is the perfect use case for roaming. So what you do is you put all of the Rocky Mountain channels from the RMHAM network into a roaming group and hit roam. So you'll stay on Rocky Mountain, but it'll always be tuned to the strongest repeater. That's where that feature comes in very handy and is very, very useful. Okay? If you mix talk groups, if you mix radio networks in that roaming group, you never know where you're going to land, and it gets very confusing. Now, if that's like roulette for you and you like to do like a DMR network roulette, have at it. Just know what you're doing. Okay? In the back.
On what you just said, if I understand you right, okay, I could set up a roaming list for Rocky Mountain Ham wide. Or,
Correct.
yeah, Rocky Mountain wide. And I'm in Denver, and now I drive to Albuquerque, and I don't have to change repeaters. It's going to do it for me.
That's the whole concept, correct. Now, obviously, if you're in a dead spot in Raton Pass or whatever, where you can't get access to any of the repeaters, it's just going to sit on the last one until it gets one in range that it can tune to that's stronger, right? But the idea there is that once you get to close enough to Sandia Mountain, and you can ping it and say, oh, I can do that, and it's the strongest signal, it'll tune to it. That's what roaming is.
Doing that automatically, it's trying to log into that repeater?
Well, not log in, it's just listening for it.
Here's Beacon. Yeah, 60 seconds. Yes. We have our repeaters transmitting, it's called a beacon in Motorola IPSC terminology. So that's just like a cell phone tower would be doing. And if you have the correct radio, it can scan for those, go through a roaming list until it finds the strongest one, and then it'll set your channel to that. Yep, or if it can hear active conversation from the repeater.
Yeah, if somebody's talking on it, it's obviously just transmitting it to hear it.
Because it's comparing RSSI?
Yes.
Cool.
And if you go deep into the settings, you can actually fiddle with those RSSI levels, the thresholds. Yeah.
So the question always comes, can you do roaming on DMR radios? Yes, if the radio supports it. The Motorola's do, the Kenwoods do. The Anytones support a very bastardized version of it, in my opinion, but it's there. It's not easy or intuitive to set up, but it's there. But again, just know what you're doing. Whatever's in that roaming group, it's going to key to the strongest signal, regardless of what you do. And so if you don't know what you're doing with the channels that you assign to that roaming group, it could leave you a little bit surprised and frustrated. Just be aware.
But
Yes.
the key is it works well on Motorola's and Kenwoods. On others, your mileage may vary.
Your miles may vary, avoid prohibited, do not pass go. Yes. All right. Now. What? Roaming? No, there's not roaming on TYD. The only ones that I know of that support it, Motorola, Kenwood, and Anytone. That's the only ones that I know of. Of course, somebody's brother, sister's former roommate could release a radio based on Anytones tomorrow, and they have another brand name that now supports roaming. Yeah. All right. Questions? Everybody got their zone created? Okay. So now that you've got your zone created, you're done, essentially. Your next step is to get that code plug into your radio. Now, I would save this as a workshop, so save the file as like workshop or something, so you don't override your existing one. Always a good thing. So let's see if we can get that saved and sent up into your radio, if you have your radios with you. Yeah, save, obviously, yeah. So again, file management doesn't go out the window just because you're doing this. Save it as a different file name. Don't save it over your other ones. Or if you need to read out of your radio before you do this, do so, and save it as a different one. Okay. Now, if we did this right. Somebody was just transmitting. AI 7 p.m. Workshop it. All right. AI 7 p.m. There he is. So this is a Pi-Star based hotspot. This little guy right here, Raspberry Pi 4 with a dual hat on it. So the dual hat actually allows you to emulate a repeater with different transmit and receive frequencies, which is really cool. And I've only got, again, pared this down. For time slot 1, I've got 3108, which is Colorado. 3156, which I believe is New Mexico, if I remember that correctly, on time slot 1. So we got 2 on time slot 1. The two ones aren't very active, so I'm not too worried about it. Hopefully somebody will transmit soon. Okay, play star B. There we go. So now you've got all the funky concepts on how to program a radio. Any concepts that aren't making sense or any other questions? Yes.
Roaming, you could.
Yes, absolutely. Zones, scan lists, roam lists, yes, doesn't matter. Yeah, so some of the radios, depending on how they are, the radio cables emulate a COM port. And on the Anytones, if you go up to, I think it's always kind of set, you set COM. Either select from a list or select a pull down for a COM port. Make sure you have the right COM port. Check one then the other. So what do you got there? So there's your channel. Oh, I think I know. That might be a security feature on my side. Hang on. I may have my lockdown just to respond to my DMR IDs. That is a Pi-Star feature. All right, let's look behind the curtain here for a second. That shouldn't matter. Yeah, so the public is anybody. Okay, you're good. Good. So those stay in there regardless of whether you set private or public. Just so that you don't have to re-put them in if you change it. Let's check. So my receive is 433.6. Your transmit should be 433.6. Your transmit is 433.6. Okay, you have color code 1? Nope. Is it time? You said time slot 2? Yeah, did I say time slot 2? Yes. Okay, give me a second, please. Don't change your programming. I removed it from time slot 1. Is this not working? It says okay. Okay. So time slot 1, oh wait, 3108. Time slot 1, delete, modify static. There we go. Brandmeister API v2. It didn't take it off, the bastards. There it went, yay. So now, I have 3156 on 1, 3108 on 2. You may try again, sir. Are you on low? My hat may have died. That'd be great. This is K0NGA on time slot 2 on my hotspot transmitting to Brandmeister, Colorado. A lot of people heard you. Heard me.
Probably me.
3108 is the talk group.
It's a group call?
Yes. Private. So that's something else. So terminology here. Okay. So you've got your talk group and your radio ID, right? In some CPSs, the talk group is called a group call, and the radio ID is called a private call. So make sure that the talk group, the 3108 that you programmed, is a group call. There we go. So let's take a look. Look at your channel. 433.6, 438.6, digital, low, different color codes, scanless none, BM Colorado. Receive group list, workshop doesn't matter. Very good.
I was just gonna make sure I have my, I always forget that it gives you a different,
Your radio ID shouldn't matter. Go back to your, yeah. Cancel that. Go to your contact talk group. (3108) group call alert. Okay, interesting. All right, let me see your radio. Radio, nope. Channel type, digital, bandwidth, whoops. Bandwidth, narrow. Transmit frequency. That's the receive is 438.6. Transmit is receive. Transmit is 433.6. 433.6. Okay. Talk around is off. Good. Transmit allow is on different color code. Yeah. Color code is 1. Time slot is 2. Encrypt is off. That's annoying. Does anyone else want to try transmitting? Go to your device manager. Driver's not installed correctly for your radio. You may have to go look for the TYT COM port driver. Huh? Does anybody else want to try transmitting? Anybody brave want to try transmitting? Nobody else wants to transmit? Why not? Won't transmit?
It does, but it doesn't come back properly. I was getting no repeater or bad repeater or something.
Hey, Mike, could you send a test transmission again?
Yep, give me a sec. This one actually has an offset on it. That's amazing.
Got an off? What?
Bandwidth.
No,
Yeah, got it. Receive 3438, transmit 433. Talk around is off.
and I'm on Colorado.
Time slot 2.
I don't have a receive group, but I use
That shouldn't matter.
Colorado thing.
Talk around.
Mode is repeater.
Where is the talk group?
Contact I'm using is 3108 group call. I
Yep.
picked this.
Yep, that's the one it should be. Yes. Someone was just transmitting.
Conga Mike, there is a question in the chat
Very
here
good. Chat question.
from Wade K0WJF, and he says, for any tone, must you have a receive group or is this optional?
It is optional if you want to use, if you only want to listen on the talk group that's assigned, or if you use digital monitor. Doug, you were transmitting.
I did too. I got through. I turned off the transmit commit. I changed it from different color code to always.
Okay, good.
Now I'm hitting
Okay, that's interesting. What is mine set to? We're learning all sorts of things today. Channel set.
Of course, I didn't hear it coming back on anybody.
You won't unless somebody comes in from the outside and transmits out. This is not a repeater.
Right, no, but what I'm saying is, I can hear you talking on somebody else's radio.
Yep.
By the way, it is the 11th hour of the 11th month.
Yes. Okay, so sidebar. There is an issue with Brandmeister because you'll notice I only have 3108 and 3156 on my hotspot active. See all these talk group 91s coming through. This is something that is a known issue with Brandmeister. It doesn't matter what you have set. Talk group 91s will come into your hotspot. It's a pain in the butt. Don't know why it happens, but it does. Worldwide. One of the old worldwide ones. Yep. Okay. It's coming in on time slot 2. But yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's just that when we, well, yeah. So the thing here is that this doesn't repeat back out that channel. It's just here to see if you can get in. So unlike a repeater, so a repeater, you transmit in the transmit, it'll transmit out the transmit out. Hotspots don't do that because they're single-use devices. They're single-user devices generally. So that means that when you transmit in, it just goes out to Brandmeister. It doesn't come back to your end and come back out. And the locally, it won't transmit back out either because it's a hotspot, not a repeater. There are hats that'll do that, but the hotspot hats don't do that because there's no need to in the use case that they're intended for. Right, so the people out there can hear you. We won't be able to hear us on the radio unless you went somewhere else and then transmitted back in through here.
But if there was somebody talking on the Colorado channel.
It will transmit out to here, and then anybody that's tuned to the channel will hear it because it's transmitting it out on radio. Yep. All right. Because I have different talk group and it works for me. So that's one of the, again, it's an anytone quirk. All right, we're coming up on 11 o'clock. We're at just after 11 o'clock. We just missed 11, 11, 11, 11, 11, 11, 11. Give us 6 more minutes and we'll be at 11, 11, 11 on 11, 11. All right. So We're at the end of the actual content for the class. At this point, we'll open it up for open forum, open questions for DMR programming or other DMR topics. Thoughts and questions or anything? Question at the cameraman here.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and point out, from looking at the RMHAM webpage, when you're looking at the frequencies and things to program in, since we do have New Mexico repeaters in there, the transmit and receive are pretty much reverse what we're used to here in Colorado. I've never put them in backwards, but it's kind of interesting. You get used to putting the high channel in, and just to be aware of the reverse channel. I think Mike will show you on the screen what I'm talking about between us, especially if you're putting the New Mexico information in your code plugs.
So perfect example here, Durango, Colorado. So again, so go back up to here. The output is to the right, the input is to the left, right? So we go down here to Durango. The repeater output is 445, the input is 440. So the input is under the output. If you look just down here to Farmington, which is in New Mexico, it's the other way. So the input is below, and the output is on top. They're switched. That's just because they do it differently in New Mexico.
Of course we would.
And that's the way we like it, darn it. Yep. So, New Mexico follows the commercial standard, and in John's opinions, Colorado was backwards. Oh, no.
Hey, Mike, we have another question from the chat.
Wait. So hold on. You'll notice the little red there? That means somebody's transmitting and it's receiving out, so you're going to be blocked until that goes away. Question from the Zoom.
So this has to do with the CCARC recommended hotspot channels. Can you, first of all, show the page and how people can find them?
Yes.
And the question that comes from Dennis, N0ABC, is why aren't you using one?
I am using one.
Ah, okay.
So, CCARC is Colorado coordination, right? So if you do CCARC hotspot,
Since I'm the chairman, you better be using a hotspot frequency.
I'm using a hotspot frequency.
It comes up as a default when you're programming the 5-star.
438.6. I'm using a hotspot frequency. Thank you very much. Down here, it says, most hotspots operate simplex. It should one list frequency for both transmit and receive. If a hotspot is full duplex, receive frequency should be 5 megahertz lower. I believe that my input frequency is 5 megahertz lower. Negative offset. So there it is. So this exists. Again, the easiest way to get here is you go into your search engine and do CCARC hotspot. These are frequencies that have specifically been set aside by CCARC for hotspot use. In Colorado, the Colorado connection of repeaters, not New Mexico. Every state should have their own. So if you have a hotspot, it is best practices to please use one of these frequencies. It avoids issues. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, again, they're still transmitting. Look at that. Still transmitting. On time slot 2. Yep. VHF simplex for hotspots? Do those exist? Most hotspots are UHF. I've never seen a VHF hotspot. Because the equipment needed is so much bigger and whatnot, it makes it a little bit wonky.
And that's the dual band hat.
Weird. Okay. I'm going to reboot this to see if I can get 91 off of there. And we'll see if we're going. All right. Other questions while I reboot my hotspot? Any other questions? Open spot 4. That's what this hotspot looks like. They're not cheap. Just because it's to organize it. It's just as an organizational thing. Okay?
fix the issue that if you put a private note in there, it doesn't save it to the file?
I think so.
'Cause I know that was the problem that I had with the 3.
So the OpenSpot Pro, this has come down because it used to be 299 euros. It's now 259 euros. The non-Pro is 179 euros. The Pro, the difference between the two, I believe, hold on. So the Pro has that Shark RF Link app that you can use to transmit without a radio as well. And I think now it will actually do native D-Star to DMR crosstalk inside here. So, and just so you know, €259 is 277 bucks. You will pay tax, and you will also pay any kind of foreign transaction fees your credit card may have. So be aware. So what is the difference between this and this? It is more portable. It has a built-in battery. What else? Both have Wi-Fi. This is a project. It requires a Pi Star, a hat, and software that hasn't seen an update in 2 years. Okay? Now, there are folks, and I'm one of those, that like that kind of a thing, like to tinker with it and whatnot. That's great. Just know what you're getting into. This is proprietary. It's a commercial product. This is sold as a unit, but it has an organization behind it that is maintaining firmware. Okay? They both have their pros and cons, right? So choose according to your own desires there. They both work, right? But this, like I said, this now has native D-Star and DMR crosstalk, has an app that you can talk through without a radio. You know, you get what you pay for. It's good stuff. And when the Raspberry Pi hiatus was still in full swing, it was hard to get Raspberry Pis. You can get hats like this. I got this hat on Amazon. It's a cheap knockoff hat, but it works. Questions?
The one thing I've encountered when playing with the Pi Star hats is that it sometimes requires some manual fiddling of a frequency correction parameter. Do you experience that a lot too? And
I haven't had that much trouble with mine.
okay,
I had no drift on that.
that's good.
Some of the older ones, I understand, have that issue. Some of the older ones had that issue, but they showed you in the tutorial how to test for that on the new ones. And the one that I bought, cheapest one on Amazon, had 0 drift. I got no packet loss at all. So
Thanks for sharing.
That's really annoying. Trying to get that 91 to go away. No response. And of course, they spelled response wrong. That's great. That's really annoying. So here's what we're going to do. If you want to chatter on this, go back and change your channel so that your channel's on time slot 1. So now we're moving back to time slot 1. And then on the time slot 2, 3108, we'll drop it. That is really freaking annoying. Yep, 438.6 should be your receive. 433.6 should be your transmit and your radio. So in your radio transmit frequency should be 433.6. And your radio transmit frequency should be 438.6. 438. Did you get your driver thing figured out?
I did, yeah, I got it to program.
Yay! Windows. So change it over to time slot 1.
I did that.
You got it. Yep. There you go.
Test 1, 2.
I think you got your channels backwards because you're transmitting on everybody's receive.
No, I think that comes out as a cluster.
Not when he transmits. Who was that transmitting? Yeah, that shouldn't have happened. What'd your call sign? That was wow. That's interesting. Huh?
Yeah, because if you transmit, it would be the same thing.
Yeah. Hang on. And now I've got it. I need to change my talk group here.
I thought that was one of the big differences between the simplex and the
It may do. I may be actually wrong on that. Channel set. Color code time slot. Time slot 1. Turn off my digital monitor. There we go. Okay. So here we go. Let's try this. This is K0NGA on Brandmeister, Colorado. Testing. Okay, good. That's cool. All right. There's something different. All right.
So I am correct.
You are correct.
Okay.
You're good. All right. Any other questions or topics? We'll give you guys some of your day back.
So I am going to go out to Upper Podunk, and they have a DMR repeater there. How do I know that I programmed my radio correctly before I get there?
So he's going out to somewhere remotely to a repeater that's out somewhere, and he wants to be able to talk on that repeater. When he gets there, how does he know that he has it done correctly? First of all, find the website or the information for that repeater and program it, right? But until you get there, you can't really tell until you're in range.
The real answer is bring your laptop with you. Just
Obviously, that's
don't
kind
take
of
any
assumed.
chances.
If your laptop's the only way to program the radio, bring your laptop to program it. So there's
And
that.
Related, but a slightly different question. So if I'm going to be doing, a cross-country drive and I want to talk DMR along the way, is there any way to do that? Is there like the equivalent of a 146.52 frequency that, is a national that I would be able to talk to others on? Does that even exist?
Not really. There is the DMR mark simplex frequency. All right. Now, let me throw you this at you because this is what I do. Who here does not have a smartphone? Okay. How many people here know that you can do a Wi-Fi hotspot on your phone? Right? Wi-Fi hotspot. Wi-Fi hotspot. So if you set this up with your favorite channels on Brandmeister or whatnot, you always have those channels with you so long as you have a cell phone signal.
Yeah, but I'm not able to talk to local hams as I'm.
Well, so if you're looking for local hams in that area, no.
Yeah, right. I understand that you could use that if you want to check into your favorite DMR nets while you're away,
Yeah.
and that's cool.
Yeah.
But,
from that, there's really not anything universal outside of the DMR mark simplex, and not everybody uses that. So no, there's nothing like that yet in the DMR world that I'm aware of. Yeah, worldwide Brandmeister, but then people have to be listening on it. So it's the same problem. Research where you're going, research what repeaters are there as best you can, and pre-program it would be the only way really to be able to do
yeah,
that.
so you could do Brandmeister US English, and
But again, the downside is that the hams actually have to be listening to Brandmeister on that channel. That's the only downside.
there's nobody to talk to.
But they still have to be listening to the repeat. Yeah. Other questions?
Mike, I was going to comment, when I'm on a road trip, I run repeater book and I select DMR. And as one of the repeater types or mode types
Okay.
that I can use while I'm on the road, and I can see what DMR repeaters are in the area. Yeah, there's the problem of how do I put that information into a radio?
Still have to program it, but yeah,
But other
repeater
than
book.
that little problem.
Yeah, exactly.
you-
Repeater book has started covering DMR stuff, thankfully, but as fast as DMR works sometimes as soon as it's in print, it's out of date. So your mileage may vary, but it's still a good place to start.
Well, repeater book being live.
Oh, live repeater book, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, live repeater
So,
book.
and the admins are pretty good, especially here in Colorado. Ours are
Excellent.
really good about keeping them accurate.
Good deal. Question here.
Yeah, so is talk around the only way you could do simplex in the digital protocol?
No. So simplex, at simplest way to do simplex is just set your transmit and receive frequency to the same frequency.
Okay.
Instant simplex.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's a carryover. That there's talk around in amateur radio radios, commercial radios. That's not unique to DMR.
I guess I got a question since we've got some time. Since you brought up the hotspots, can you tell us a little about the use of the SIDs and some things on them?
SIDS, yeah, okay. So this is something actually we didn't talk about. So it should come to no surprise. Every radio in a DMR network has to have a radio ID. That should be unique, right? The same is true for repeaters. Every repeater has a repeater ID. Okay? So if you have a hotspot, technically you need a repeater ID, but there's a very, very simple workaround for that. Okay? So if you look here, I believe it's here, my DMR repeater has a 7-digit DMR ID. That 7-digit DMR ID is actually my DMR, my radio ID that I use for my radios. But they add in this CC. What does the CC stand for? No, not in this case. I have no idea what it means. It's an extension onto the DMR mark ID. It's actually 2-digit. It only shows 1 digit because it starts with 0. So effectively, my hotspot repeater ID, you don't need to know the actual specific one, is 3108-11101. So I have a unique repeater ID because it's based on my radio ID, which is unique. Okay? So that's the way that you set up your radio ID on if you have a hotspot. Add a 2-digit extension onto that. Start with 01 on your existing radio ID. You're there. So all that stuff is specific to PyStar.
I have one and I don't have that.
Why don't you have that?
Well, I mean, I don't know that it's not a button that I just haven't.
No, this is the default config. It listens for things, I guess. Because when I set this needs to go green, that goes green. I mean, that's all I know when my DMR is set up. I would guess not.
Mike, if you can do that 01 with a hotspot, why can't you do that with the second?
What do you mean second transmitter?
Add 2 portables.
Oh, because these all have to be 7-digit. Only only this kind of hotspot thing supports 9-digit like that. And typically, and repeater IDs, actual repeaters, I think, are 6-digit. Okay. Right. So radio IDs are 7. I've never seen anything other than a 7-digit radio ID.
This number is not actually being transmitted over the air by the hotspot. It's a pass-through device. You can think of it like a Wi-Fi access point. This is not being encoded over the air the same way that BDU program into your radio is.
Yep. Let's go into the expert config and see if we can figure out what that watchdog is, because somebody asked.
Yeah, the watchdog is just to keep an eye on the system and reboot or restart services if something malfunctions.
Oh, is that what that is? So that's just a back-end system process then? Okay. Yes.
I would try to find a page called services or something.
Yeah. That's why it's like there's a lot of fiddling you can do with this, and if you do something wrong, you can make things not work and you have to restart. That's why I like this one for my actual day-to-day use that I depend on. This is the one that's in my car, because I don't want to have to fiddle with it, right? Not at the moment. It's here for demonstration purposes. This is the one that I keep in my car when I'm not demoing it. Captain Pedantic over there. All right, any other questions? Anything from the Zoom? All right. Willem, I think we'll close it here. If you want to make any closing remarks, or one more question. The recording will be available on the website for review as soon as we get it up there. Yep, our YouTube stream will go directly to a watch on demand as soon as we cut it off.
Was there another question that we needed to field?
Nope, I think that's it.